The slam of the front door echoed like a gunshot through the quiet suburban street in Riverside, Iowa, as Elias stood there, just 14 years old and completely alone. His backpack slung over one shoulder and tears streaming down his face. In that moment, the only thing he knew for sure was that his parents' love had died the second they discovered he was gay. The argument had exploded just minutes earlier when his father found the folded note from school, the one where Elias had confessed his feelings for another boy in his class. "This is not how I raised you," his dad had shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of fury and disappointment that cut deeper than any slap. His mother had stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, clutching a dish towel, her eyes filled with tears but her mouth silent, offering no defense for the son she had once called her pride and joy. They had packed the bag in under 10 minutes, pressing $20 into his hand like it was payment for a broken contract, and pushed him onto the porch with the warning never to return. The spring night air felt sharper than usual, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the neighbor's yard, a reminder of all the normal evenings he would never have again. Elias walked for hours, his sneakers scuffing against the cracked sidewalks of the small town, past the high school where kids whispered about him already, and the church where his family had sat every Sunday pretending perfection. He thought about his older sister, away at college, who might never even hear the full story until it was too late. Sleep came in fits on a bench in the town park, the cold metal biting into his back as he curled up with his backpack as a pillow. Hunger gnawed at him by morning, but pride kept him from knocking on doors. Instead, he hitched a ride with a trucker heading toward Chicago, the big city lights calling like a distant promise of somewhere he might not be judged so harshly. The youth center he found there after 2 days of wandering became his first real lifeline, a place where volunteers listened without pity and helped him enroll in a program for homeless teens. They gave him a cot, meals, and a chance to finish school through night classes while he worked odd jobs at a coffee shop downtown. Every shift tested him, the ache of missing his family mixing with the fear of what came next. But Elias pushed through, learning to lock away the questions about why his own blood had turned against him. Months blurred into a year, filled with small victories like earning his GED and making tentative friends at the center. Yet the internal storm never fully quieted. He wondered if he would ever feel whole again or if the label of being gay would always mean starting over alone. The lakefront walks at night became his ritual, staring at the endless water and whispering promises to himself that one day he would build a life worth the pain of that slammed door. By the time Elias turned 18, Chicago had begun to feel less like a refuge and more like a proving ground, the bustling streets teaching him resilience in ways his small-town upbringing never could. He had secured a part-time scholarship to community college through the youth program, studying social work with a quiet determination to help others avoid the isolation he had known. The days were long, balancing classes with shifts at the coffee shop, where customers sometimes glanced twice at his worn clothes, but never knew the story behind them. One afternoon, a new volunteer named Brody walked into the center during a group session, his easy smile and steady presence immediately standing out among the usual crowd of helpers. Brody was 22, already working as a counselor for at-risk youth, and something in the way he listened without interrupting made Elias feel seen for the first time since leaving home. Their conversation started casually over shared coffee breaks, Elias opening up about the porch night in fragments while Brody shared his own path, coming from a supportive family in the suburbs but choosing this work because he understood the quiet battles many faced. Friendship grew naturally through late-night study sessions and weekend walks along the lake, where they talked about everything from books to the weight of expectations. Elias found himself laughing again, the kind of genuine sound he had almost forgotten, and when Brody suggested they grab pizza after a tough shift, it felt like the beginning of something deeper without any pressure. The turning point came on a rainy evening when Elias broke down over a failed exam, the old rejection flooding back, and Brody simply sat beside him, offering a shoulder without judgment. "You're not defined by what they did," Brody had said softly, his words landing like a lifeline. As months passed and Elias turned 21, their bond shifted into something more, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams rather than grand gestures. Brody encouraged Elias to apply for a full scholarship at the university, helping him craft essays that poured out his experiences without self-pity. Together they navigated the challenges of city life, from cramped apartments to navigating social circles where being open about their relationship still carried risks. Elias's internal doubts lingered in quiet moments, the fear that he might never fully escape the shadow of that slammed door, but Brody's steady support helped him face them head-on. Their first real milestone came when Elias landed an internship at a nonprofit advocating for LGBTQ youth, the work feeling like a full circle from his own struggles. Through it all, the connection with Brody deepened into love, not flashy or dramatic but real, rooted in the everyday choices to stand together against the world's judgments. Elias began to see a future where his past did not have to dictate his worth, though the occasional letter from his sister, who had learned the truth years later and offered tentative contact, stirred old wounds he was not yet ready to reopen. The years rolled forward with a rhythm Elias had never imagined possible back on that Iowa porch, his life in Chicago solidifying into something stable and meaningful alongside Brody. At 25, Elias had graduated with honors and taken a full-time role as a youth counselor at the same center that had saved him, guiding teenagers through the same identity crises and family rejections he once endured. The work was demanding, filled with late calls from scared kids and court appearances to advocate for better support systems, but it gave him purpose that healed old fractures in ways therapy alone could not. Brody, now a senior counselor at a nearby clinic, complemented him perfectly. Their evenings often spent debriefing cases over simple dinners in their modest apartment overlooking the lake. Their relationship had matured into a quiet strength, marked by small rituals like Sunday morning runs along the waterfront and honest conversations about the pressures they both faced as gay men in a world that still whispered doubts. Elias occasionally grappled with lingering shame from his upbringing, moments when a client's story mirrored his own too closely and sent him spiraling into what-ifs about his parents. But Brody was always there to ground him, reminding him of the progress he had made. Success came in tangible forms, like the grant Elias secured to expand the center's outreach program, earning local recognition that felt surreal for a kid once thrown away. Family ties remained fractured, his sister's occasional emails growing more frequent but never bridging the gap completely, and Elias chose to focus forward rather than dwell. The bond with Brody deepened during a particularly challenging winter when one of their young clients faced a similar eviction, prompting the two men to open their home temporarily and advocate fiercely together. Those experiences forged an unbreakable trust, Elias realizing that love was not about erasing the past but building something stronger in spite of it. By 27, they had moved to a brighter apartment, talked about long-term plans like fostering youth themselves, and attended Pride events hand in hand, the visibility feeling empowering rather than terrifying. Yet beneath the surface, Elias carried a quiet restlessness, the unresolved questions about his roots surfacing in sleepless nights. Brody sensed it, encouraging gentle steps toward closure without pushing, their partnership a safe harbor through every internal storm. The work continued to shape him, turning pain into advocacy that helped dozens of young people find their footing. And in those victories, Elias saw reflections of his own growth. Life felt full, balanced between career fulfillment and the steady warmth of Brody's presence, though he knew deep down that some chapters could not stay closed forever. The phone call came on a crisp autumn morning when Elias was 28, his mother's voice cracking over the line after years of silence, pulling him back to Riverside with news that his father had suffered a heart attack and might not recover. The words hung heavy, stirring a storm of emotions Elias thought he had buried long ago. But Brody stood beside him in their kitchen, squeezing his hand and offering to drive the 5-hour trip without hesitation. The decision to return was not easy, layers of resentment and fear clashing with a reluctant sense of duty. Yet Elias knew facing it was the only way forward. They packed lightly, the car ride filled with quiet reflections as fields gave way to the familiar small-town roads, Brody's calm presence a steady anchor against the rising anxiety. Pulling into the driveway of the same suburban house felt surreal, the porch unchanged yet somehow smaller, and when his mother opened the door her eyes widened in disbelief at the confident man before her, especially when Elias introduced Brody as his partner. The shock rippled through the family like an earthquake, his sister arriving from out of state and freezing in the hallway, while his father, weak but conscious in the hospital bed later that day, stared without words. Elias had prepared for anger or rejection, but the stunned silence was almost worse, forcing him to confront how much he had changed while the town remained trapped in its old ways. Conversations started haltingly in the hospital waiting room, his mother fumbling through apologies laced with excuses about their faith and fears. But Elias held his ground, sharing fragments of his journey without seeking pity. Brody stayed supportive in the background, his presence a quiet testament to the life Elias had built, though the tension in the air thickened with every glance from relatives who whispered about the situation. Nights at a local motel gave them space to process, Elias pacing as old memories resurfaced, questioning if this return was a mistake or a necessary step. The community buzzed with rumors, old school acquaintances avoiding eye contact at the grocery store, amplifying the isolation he remembered so well. Yet in small gestures, like his sister offering coffee and listening without judgment, cracks of possibility appeared. Elias's work as a counselor proved invaluable, helping him navigate the emotional minefield with tools he had honed helping others, and Brody's unwavering belief reminded him he was no longer the scared boy on the porch. The return had upended everything, leaving the family reeling and Elias at the center of a storm he had not anticipated. But for the first time he felt equipped to weather it on his own terms. Confrontations unfolded over the following weeks like layers peeling back from an old wound, each conversation exposing raw truths that had festered for over a decade in the riverside living room where Elias once sat as a child. His father, recovering slowly at home, finally spoke one evening, his voice hoarse as he admitted the fear that had driven him to slam that door, but the words came laced with defensiveness that reignited Elias's anger. "We thought we were protecting you," he said, prompting Elias to recount the years of struggle, the shelters, the doubt, all while Brody sat silently offering strength. Misunderstandings piled up when his sister confessed she had known about his feelings even back then, but stayed silent out of loyalty to their parents. The betrayal stinging deeper than expected and leading to heated arguments that echoed through the house. An old school friend, the one whose note had sparked the original discovery, reappeared at a family gathering and unwittingly revealed he had shared details out of misguided concern, sparking accusations of betrayal that forced Elias to relive the humiliation. Internal crisis gripped him during sleepless nights, doubts whispering that returning had been foolish and that his hard-won identity might crumble under the weight of their prejudice. Brody bore the brunt of the emotional fallout, their motel talks turning tense when Elias questioned if love could survive this pull back to the past, though Brody refused to let him push away, reminding him of the man he had become. Sacrifices emerged as Elias chose to stay longer than planned, using his counseling skills to mediate family sessions that uncovered years of unspoken regrets. Yet each step forward met resistance from extended relatives who viewed Brody as an outsider. The pressure mounted during a town event where whispers turned to open stares, testing Elias's resolve and stirring the identity crisis he thought conquered. In one raw moment alone with his mother, she broke down admitting the guilt that had haunted her, but forgiveness felt distant amid the lingering pain. Brody suggested they leave if it became too much, an offer of escape that highlighted the depth of their partnership, yet Elias pressed on, determined not to repeat the cycle of running. The conflicts built to a peak during a heated dinner where accusations flew, forcing everyone to confront the real cost of their choices. And in the aftermath Elias faced his deepest fear, that acceptance might never come. Through it all, the emotional toll weighed heavily, but the growth from his Chicago years gave him tools to stand firm, transforming the return from a potential breaking point into a crucible that revealed the strength he and Brody shared. Resolution dawned gradually in the weeks that followed the stormiest arguments, like sunlight breaking through persistent clouds over the Iowa fields, as small acts of understanding began to bridge the chasm Elias had carried for so long. His father, still frail but reflective, initiated a private talk on the back porch where the original rejection had occurred, offering a genuine apology stripped of excuses and acknowledging the harm his prejudice had caused. A moment that left Elias breathless with the weight of validation he never expected. The family gathered more openly after that, his sister actively advocating for change and even attending a local support group Elias recommended. while his mother prepared meals with quiet care that spoke volumes beyond words. Brody became an integral part of the healing, sharing stories from his own work that humanized their relationship and helped the family see beyond labels to the love and commitment that defined it. Elias made the ultimate sacrifice by extending his stay to help with his father's rehabilitation, drawing on his professional expertise to coordinate care, and in the process forging new bonds that felt earned rather than owed. The internal awakening came during a quiet evening walk with Brody, where Elias realized the past no longer defined him but had shaped the compassionate man he had become, capable of extending grace without erasing the pain. As tensions eased, the family hosted a simple dinner where laughter returned for the first time in years, the sight of his parents, including Brody, in conversations marking a profound shift. Elias and Brody stood together in the same park where Elias had once hidden as a teen, now embracing under the bright afternoon sun, the moment filled with the kind of peaceful joy that only comes after surviving the hardest trials. The return had not erased the scars, but it had rewritten their meaning, turning rejection into a catalyst for deeper connections and personal triumph. With plans to visit more often and continue building their life in Chicago, Elias felt truly free for the first time. True or false? Can the family that once turned you away for being gay ever become your home again?